Uh, Hello, Dr. Kiran. Kranthi, Kiran. Hello.
Now can you hear me? Hello?
Yeah, it's audible now. Students, we have with us Dr. Kranthi Kiran, who is a senior research fellow at CCMB, and who is, working on protein crystalline, I mean, alpha beta crystalline or something like that, if I'm not wrong. And he's working in the lab of CH Mohan Rao sir's group, who is distinguished scientist at CCMB. And pardon me, I have not more details about you, as one of my colleague has suggested your name. So yeah, so
Yeah.
on behalf of Srishti, very warm welcome and over to you.
Yeah, thank you. First of all, I would like to thank Srishti and Bairak for giving me this opportunity uh, to speak about this topic called research methodology. My name is Kranthi Kiran Akula, as she has introduced, as Dr. Megha has introduced me. I am a PhD student in CCMB and I have submitted my thesis recently. I will be awarded my degree soon. So, without delay, let us start the research methodology topic for today. So, hello,
Yeah. Please go ahead. Sorry.
ma'am. Can I ask you one question? Like, will the students be asking me questions meanwhile, because they can as well ask questions in between. It doesn't matter. So, because
No problem, sir. So, students, you are feel free to ask in between and after the session also. Majorly, they used to ask the questions in the last only.
in the last, okay, fine.
But yeah.
Okay, fine. So let's begin. So, what's research methodology, right? So, yeah. So first of all, what is curiosity? If you have a curiosity to know something, that's where basically your research starts. So curiosity is nothing but your desire to know something that you don't know before. So how do you answer your questions? Like, first is by asking those questions. You ask why, what, and how. And the specific queries that we are talking about in science, it's called a scientific query. That is the question of research. So what is a scientific query? Scientific query is, it refers to a diverse ways in which scientists study the natural world and propose explanations based on the evidence derived from their work. So here, when I say scientist, I really don't mean scientist by profession. Any person who has a curiosity, who wants to ask a question, can be called a scientist, in the sense that they will explore the resources that they have to find out the answer, and they can be also called a scientist. Just like if you teach a junior of yours, say for example, if you are 12th student or something, then you teach a 10th class student, you're still called a teacher, but your profession is not teaching. Similarly, everybody is a scientist, whoever seeks for an answer of a query, for a query. So what type of questions do we ask? Like, what type of questions do exist? Like, there are different kinds of questions. One type of questions that we are talking of over here is the testable questions. Testable questions is something that can be put to test, that can be proved. So these questions should be very specific. For example, are there any solvents that extract the green color from the leaves? The green color from the leaves is chlorophyll. So yeah, you can extract it using acetone, or you can try it you can try it by different solvents like water, alcohol, and other things. But then this is something that is testable. But then if you ask a question like, why is the sky blue? Yes, the question can be answered, but then it cannot be proven because the resources will not be at your hand, at your disposal. So those questions have multiple answers, and then they have different ways of approaches. So uh, that will not be qualifying as a testable question to start with, because testable questions should be specific. And then another type of questions are like closed and open questions. So one question is, say for example, what is the name of the third planet from the sun? So everybody knows that it is Earth. So that is a factual question. You ask you get the answer. That's the end of it. But then if you ask a question like how did the third planet from the sun get there, like how the earth is placed in the third position, that is again like you have multiple theories, multiple answers for it. So those questions are called as closed open questions, whereas something that has an answer, a blunt answer, that is a closed question. I hope people understand. Yeah. So what is research? Research is is nothing but search for knowledge, or it is a systematized effort to gain new knowledge. So it can be called as the original contribution. When I say original, that means that you have done it for the first time, and you do something for the first time and find out some things, and your findings you add it to the existing stock of knowledge. Existing stock of knowledge are the resources that we have at our disposal, like books, internet, databases, and library, for example, where the knowledge is stored. So your contribution will be added to the existing stock of knowledge. So that's how science gets advanced. That's how research progresses. So research is nothing but it's a pursuit of truth with the help of study, observation, comparison, and experimentation. Like there is some truth. Say, for example, there is a reason why something is happening, and you want to know why it is happening. You want to know what is the reason behind it. What you do is that you study, you observe, you compare, and you experiment, and then you interpret the results. That's nothing but research. So, in short, research is the search for knowledge through an objective and a systematic method of finding a solution to a problem. The systematic approach concerning generalizations and the formulation of a theory is also research. Theoretical research is still research, although it's on paper, it is still research. Research should be scientific, systematic, verifiable, and it should also be reproducible. If you do an experiment here today, and tomorrow if you do the experiment, it should be reproducible. At the same time, if somebody else does the experiment, they should also be getting the similar results. That's what reproducibility means. So ultimately, putting a technical, coming up with a technical definition of research, research comprises of defining and redefining problems, formulating hypotheses or suggested solutions, then collecting, organizing, and evaluating data, making deductions, and reaching conclusions. And at last, carefully testing the conclusions to determine whether they fit the formulated hypothesis. So this is a little bit confusing. I'll be expanding more on this. This is a technical definition of research. So we'll go more deep into it. What research means. So as I've quoted here, we first formulate a hypothesis, then we collect the data, we organize the data, we interpret the data, and then we make a conclusion. That's what research is. So to start with, you need to have a hypothesis. If you're going to start doing research, first thing is that you need to have a question. The question would be coming from the area of your interest. Say if you're interested in, say, diabetes or something like that. Your hypothesis should be a proposed explanation, which is based on some evidence to start with, to do further investigation. So hypothesis is like a tentative answer to a problem. It can be proved right or wrong. But here, I would like to say something. Say if a person is suffering with diabetes and he has been given some medication, and you want to know how much of that medication, what dose of that medicine would work or reduce the sugar levels or blood glucose levels in that person or in a group of people. So you have to carry out an experiment to come up with a number. But to propose a hypothesis, you should not, you should be, it should be very specific. So you should be knowing that number. You can say that 1 gram of this medicine per day, per person on an average reduces the blood sugar to 50%. Something like that. So you need to have a hypothesis that way. But then because we don't know how much it's going to be, whether it's going to bring it down to 50% or 40%, we don't know. We just know that it might work. It might work as a medicine. So instead of using a hypothesis saying that this medicine X, say X, medicine X works for diabetes, you say that this medicine does not work. Because if you say this medicine does not work, you mean to say that it does not have any effect. So that is negligible and the magnitude will be zero. That means if a person is having a blood glucose level of 140 or say 180, and if you're giving this medicine, you are proposing the hypothesis in such a way that even in spite of taking the medicine, it won't change from 180. The value won't decrease or the value won't increase. So here you start with a very definite value, which is zero. That's why we propose a hypothesis called as null hypothesis, which is the opposite of what we want to hypothesize. I hope people are getting it. Then what kind of studies do we carry out in research? One is observational study. We just observe what is happening or what has happened before. We do not change any variables here. Like you give the medicine, you give that medicine to a diabetic patient, but then you do not change their diet. You retain the diet like what they have been taking previously. You just observe. But in an experimental condition, you can uh, actually change the variables. So an experiment is a procedure carried out to support or refute or validate a hypothesis. First thing is you propose a hypothesis. Second, you carry out an experiment to validate the hypothesis, whether you accept the hypothesis or you reject the hypothesis. So experiment provides confidence in determining the cause and effect relationships. For example, here medicine and then the reduction in glucose level. So that is a cause and effect relationship. Like how much dose of the medicine is bringing down the levels of glucose by how much magnitude. So here you can manipulate the independent variable to see if changes occur in the dependent variable, in the sense that the independent variable over here is you can change the dosage of the medicine, and you can see the if you uh, if you alter the variable, the medicine, the dosage of the medicine, you are actually also changing the dependent variable, which is the glucose levels here, I mean to say. Then experiments vary greatly in goal and scale. Like experiments can be small, it can be very small experiment, it can be a very big experiment. An experiment can just be a very pilot study or something, or it can be a very big study, like a global study on a global scale. But experiments always rely on repeatable procedures. I mean to say again, reproducibility and logical analysis of the results. So, but there is also something called as natural experimental studies. Like say, for example, you go and you study something in the nature. You don't get to change anything over there. Whatever variables are there, that is not in your control. There are variables, but then they are not in your control. So such kind of experiments can be called as natural experimental studies, or they're mostly observational. So what is an observation? An observation is the action or process of closely observing or monitoring something or someone. So if you have a group of population, say we want to carry out a study, you have a group of population and then you want to study the height of that person according to the age. So you want to study throughout India. So you cannot take data from each and every individual. You will have to take it only from some individual. So that some individuals is called as sampling. The maximum sample that you can have is of course the capital N, which is the entire population. But then it is not possible. So you take a percentage of the population and then as a sample. And what is a sample? Sample is nothing but a true representative of the population. So if a person is, say, 150 centimeters in height, and another person is 185 centimeters in height. Now, if I pick just one person as a sample, I would assume if I pick the person having 185 centimeters as his height as a sample, then my conclusion would be that everybody is 185 centimeters. So, or if I take the person who's having height of 150 centimeters, that I would be concluding that everybody is the average is around 150 centimeters. But that's not how it is. You carry out this work by taking samples from different regions, different social strata, and all that. It depends upon what parameters you want to fix for the study. So basically, sampling is a process used in statistical analysis, and in which a predetermined number of observations are taken from a larger population. Another example that I can give you about sampling is like if you're cooking rice or something, you just take a few grains of it and see if it is cooked or not. You don't check all the rice that is cooked or not. So that's sampling. And then from the sample, you determine what is the outcome, the total outcome for the population. Now, after you have I talked about observations, I talked about sampling, and then now you have some results, you have some observations, or you have results from some experiments that you have done. Now, these results are nothing but the outcome of the experiment of the study. Whatever experiment that you have formulated, now you have performed it, and then you have got some result. The results can be numerical results, or it can be say some pictures or something which can be later analyzed, or it can be even an opinion which cannot be converted to numerical value. So what is data? Data is nothing but whatever results that you get when you present it in the form of a facts and statistically arranged this thing, collected results, that is called data. And this data will be used for reference and also the analysis, because data is just compiling the results that you have got in an understandable way. But you have big numbers. Now you have to actually crunch all these numbers, make it small, and try to analyze it. That's what you do in data interpretation. That's what you do in data interpretation. So the data interpretation is nothing but the implementation of processes through which data is reviewed for the purpose of arriving at an informed conclusion. So you do an experiment, you have observations by taking some samples, you have results, you have data, you interpret the data to basically form a conclusion, to get to a conclusion. But what can change your interpretation or the conclusion or the data or the results are nothing but your variables. Variable is something that can take on different values. Say, for example, if you have studied algebra, you have 1, 2, 3, which are like numbers, and then you have x, y, z. They are variables. You say it as x, y, z because you don't know the real value of it. That will change according to the situation. So over here, if you're say talking about experiment where you're talking about the height and nutrition in children below 20 age, then that means that you're basically you don't know the x and y values, in the sense that you don't know what nutrition would have, how much impact nutrition would have on the height. So because we don't know, we call them as variables. Even the amount of food, the nutrition type that you take is also a variable. So your research variable for your study should be identified. And variables are of different types. There is something called as independent variable. Let's say we are carrying out an experiment where you are purposefully, on purpose, you are depriving sleep in half of the students belonging to a class, and tomorrow they will be having an examination. So you get to choose those 50. You randomly choose 50% of the students, but that is in your control. And how much sleep deprivation, like say for example, if a person sleeps for 8 hours, you can deprive them of sleep for 2 hours or 3 hours or 4 hours. That is up to you. That is in your control. That is the independent variable. But then there's something called as dependent variable, in the sense that this sleep deprivation that you have caused in all the students equally, this will be affecting the exam performance. That is not in our control, because sleep deprivation is common, but there are so many. But sleep deprivation is actually causing or affecting the exam performance. So that is not in your control. That's called as dependent variable. So something that affects the next variable, the result, that is a dependent variable. Then there's something called as extraneous variable. Like for example, there are some very minute reasons, like say temperature of in the exam hall. Say if it is very hot summer, the temperature is around 47 or something. So it will definitely have an impact on the performance of students. And the emotional state of the students at that time will be different from one student to another. And one such example of extraneous variable is confounding variable. So confounding variable is like it can be any small thing, but whenever you do a study, you basically kind of take care of all the confounding variables. If you are not aware of the confounding variables, then that becomes your limitation. Or if you cannot take care of certain variables, then that becomes your limitation. If you are, say, conducting the same study throughout India, having different climatic regions, that is not in your hand. Controlling temperature is not in your hand if you are planning to do a very big survey or very big study. So now, talking about the data, the variables, and everything, ultimately, whatever data that you get, it has to be interpreted, and then that should be put rigorously through a statistical analysis. Okay. I hope Dr. Rakesh had covered statistics for you on the 8th of December. So I would just be skipping these things. You might be knowing what a standard deviation is and what variance is and what significance level is, like whether whatever data you have, whether it is significant or not, and the confidence level, and the p-value. P-value is the probability that something could have occurred just by random chance. So if you have a lower p-value, the statistical significance is higher. So, say for example, the significance, the confidence intervals are given in terms of percentages. So, if you have to convert a confidence interval into say p-value or something like that, then you can say that 100% is equal to 1. 1 is that the chance of occurrence is for sure. That's 1. Then 5%. Usually we take 95% confidence in most of the studies, which leaves us with only 5% that won't happen. So this 5% translates to 0.05. So whenever the p-value is below 0.05, we usually consider that as significant. But again, that depends on the outcome of the research, in the sense that if this research is going to be having some implications in medicine, which is very, very sensitive, then the p-value should be much, much lower than zero point zero 0.05. So something in the order of 0.0001 or 0.00001. So it should be that significant, because it might be a matter of life and death in such situations. So what is it that we have to consider before we measure or collect any data? So because if you have to measure or collect data, first of all, you need to be having something called as data collection tools. Data collection tools is simply by recording with a pen and a paper. You have some audio recording. You can take some pictures. It could be microscopic pictures. It could be regular pictures of animals, in case if you have made a tumor or something like that. So those things. So you have to. So these, whenever you're collecting data, the data is collected with the help of certain machines or instruments. So the errors could be because of the errors in the instrument. Say for example, that error because of the instrumental. Say for example, there is a fluctuation in the voltage, and that fluctuation is actually changing the second or third digit of your reading. Now that is a random error that is not in your control. But then how can you actually reduce these errors is just by increasing the number of repetitions. Say for example, if you have to take say 2 readings, instead of that if you take 20 readings, so the fluctuations might have occurred like once or twice. So that will be cancelled out when you take the mean or the average or median or mode, whatever is applicable in that case. And there's another error called as systemic error. uh, Systemic error is like somebody has given you a scale to measure something, and that scale they've put it in a microwave oven or some kind of convection, or they've heated it. So now the scale has shrunken in size. Okay. Now whatever you measure with that shrunken scale, you think that the scale is the regular scale, and you try to measure something, and every time you end up measuring it to be bigger, because if you measure something that is a error. So that error will be which is it's very hard to identify, because I took an example of scale, because it's a very easy thing to visualize, but then there are a lot of things that you cannot visualize. So in such cases, such instruments should be calibrated, because every instrument will have to be calibrated before it has to be used. Say for example, if you're measuring pH or something, you have some standard solutions, and then these standard solutions should be used to calibrate the pH machine, and then you carry out the readings. Then we talk about something called as precision and accuracy. So, for example, uh, like you have a small tool. Say if you're doing a micro dissection or something, then the tools that you require will be very, very minute and very tiny. So you should be having those precise tools for that study. Only then it will be accurate. So whatever instruments that you're using, the sensitivity of the instruments, and that the sensitivity of the instruments actually will decide the precision or the accuracy of the results that you get. And it also depends on the study that you take up. Now, coming to types of research, there are different types of research. So one kind of research is called as library research. In library research, what we do is that we analyze the historical documents. Say, for example, some archaeological records or something. You take, say, for example, what people had, what kind of food people had 2,000 years ago or something. Then what was their average age, depending upon the skeletons that you get. So something like that. So whatever historical documents you have, you analyze them. That is library research, and you documents or records or old reports or pictures or videos. Say for example, you are into media, like you're into journalism. So you take out the pictures and videos of the past events, and then you do research like what was people's opinion back then about a certain issue, what is it now. So you just need to have the old records for library research. And another thing is field research. Field research is, again, you have to go on the site and see. So, for example, archaeological evidence is where you go and see something, and then you record. Then animal and plant behavior in the wild. Then ecological and environmental observational studies. Say, for example, how does a frog behave to drought conditions, like something like that. How does an insect react to a predator or something like that. So all that is completely field research. So field research can also be done by asking questionnaires or having interview. This is about the humans that I'm talking about. Say if you're talking about, say, electronic media or something like that, you might have actually done a lot of surveys with the YouTube survey and all that, whether this advertisement is relevant to you or not, or what kind of thing would you like to see, or if you think it is inappropriate, why do you think it is inappropriate. So all these kind of data is collected and it is analyzed. So that is a way of collecting data. That is like having questionnaires, interview. Survey is for a very large population. Then rating scale, of course, you might have done a lot of rating scales after the customer support calls many a times. And then projective tests. For example, there are some psychological tests where there is something called as an ink blot test. You just are shown some pictures and then you're asked what do you think about it, what do you see in that picture. So something that kind is called as projective tests. So all this is nothing but field research. And there is something called as laboratory research, which we are very familiar with. Like you come up with a hypothesis, you do an experiment, and then you come up with some results. So mostly it is laboratory or in the clinical settings. And then, of course, the fourth one is a mixed one. It can be a combination of one or two or all three of them. It could be starting from library research, then you do the field research, then you do a laboratory research. Like you talk about some fossil records, you check the old fossil records, and then say you go and collect some fossils, and then you measure the data, you get the data, you come back to the lab, you do carbon dating and everything to know what age it belongs to and all that. So that kind of study would involve all the three kinds of research. So that can be called as mixed research. And another way to classify research is calling them whether they're qualitative or quantitative, in the sense that quantitative is something based on numbers. Say, uh, I talked about height and nutrition, right? So that is quantitative. You just take the quantitative data. Whereas qualitative is different in a way that you ask somebody an opinion of what impact did this movie had on you. Like that kind of qualitative data is very hard to interpret in terms of numerical terms. So uh, I guess people are understanding it. Qualitative is something that's something like your opinion or something that cannot be actually converted into numbers because it won't actually fall into a similar category. Okay, so that is one thing, qualitative and quantitative. The other one is observational research, where you just observe, you don't do anything, you don't meddle with it, you don't touch, you don't change the variables, you just observe the and then you record. And something like exploratory, say for example, you have been granted access to a rainforest which was not accessible to anyone, and you are a zoologist, say for example, and then you want to go and see what kind of insects live over there, what kind of butterflies live over there. So something, you might discover a new species altogether. That is something like exploratory research. Exploratory research can also be in the laboratory. Like you can start finding about a problem that nobody has ever thought of, and there's no prior data to it, and then you start exploring and you say that, okay, this is a new disease. Now let me see what other factors would be influencing this disease or not, or something like that, or testing new drugs or something. That's all exploratory research. And experimental, of course, I've told you, experimental is mostly laboratory and mostly in the clinical settings, and then it's all very defined, and the factors, most of the factors will be in our control, and other than the compounding factors, of course. Then another way, another research differences between two researches is like, one is basic research and another is applied research. Basic research is something like, you talk about how a translation occurs in a certain, say, bacteria or some yeast or something like that. That is very, very basic research. Then we talk about applied research. So let's say, okay, let's say basic research as finding out the blood grouping. Like somebody has done it already, but then let's say it is not done. It has not been done. So you are now trying to determine how the humans are can be divided into different blood groups. Then applied research would be that you already have the knowledge, from basic research, and then you apply to make a device in a way that to know blood group, to conduct a blood grouping study or something, just a prick test would be enough. So I think Dr. Amita Sana might have spoken to you earlier about it. So it's like applied research is putting the knowledge that you have from basic research and to make or invent a new thing like a diagnostic device or a new technique or a procedure or something like that. Then you have something called empirical research. Empirical research is something that is tangible in the sense that you can touch, feel, and all that. So something that you can observe and something that you can experiment on. That is empirical research. And theoretical research is mostly dealing with theories. It deals with a lot of mathematical formula, or it can be also philosophical. Say for example, there is a lot of philosophy people, they take old philosophies and then with the new trends they change the philosophy slightly, and then that's how they advance that theory, saying that it's not validated, it is not valid even now, or it is valid even till today, something like that. So you come up with a theoretical research that way. And theoretical research in physics, metaphysics, of course, is very much known to people. And then another type is a top-down approach or bottom-up approach. Top-down approach is like you start with a very general thing. So like say what causes diabetes, and then you start from there, you start experimenting, and then you come to very specifics. This could be the reason. This small thing could be the reason. This small protein could be actually the reason. Or inflammation could be a reason. Something like that. Whereas bottom-up approach is specific to general. You observe something very, very minute, and then you start building up the story, and you come up to a general conclusion that all these factors add up to make to cause a disease or a condition or something like that. I hope people are understanding. So now, like, because we have discussed so many things, this is like a recipe for research. Like if you have to carry out a research, what is it that you need to do in a chronological order? So one thing that is called as a research process. So research process, first thing is to choose an area of interest. What is your research question? Your research area of interest can be very broad, or it can be very narrow. your research question should be a little specific. Then you talk about research objectives. So research objective is like say choosing an area. Let's say diabetes. You have chosen an area. Let me quote the same example. Then your research question is whether certain plant extract, whether that can lower the blood glucose levels in diabetic patients. That is your research question. Your research objective should be that should be followed by your research objectives. Research objectives should be like how much dose you're giving and what is it that you expect and what how are you going to conduct this study. So that is a research objective. Like you have to have it in a very clear and a very specific and a clear way. And this clear and specific objectives will give you new insights into the field, and it'll also help you to develop new theories, and it'll also help you to generalize principles, and also to determine the relationship between different variables. But the objectives, when you mention, you say that we give a certain dosage to a person or something like that. But what concentration? Of course, dose means concentration. But then, how did you extract the drug? What was the procedure to extract the drug, and how did you do it, and where you took the plant from? All these things are something which are very specific. That specific things are nothing are called as operational definitions. So each and every word that you use in your objective, they should be specifically particularly defined, and it should be unambiguous. It should not give two meanings. If you have a word in your objective saying that you're taking a plant extract, now that define what is the plant extract, how did you make it, or something like that. So operational definitions are nothing but you're defining each and every word in your objective so that your objectives are much clearer, and so that there's no ambiguity. And there's something called as a review of literature. Review of literature is you use various resources like PubMed, databases, references. Like, for example, you type diabetes on Google, you'll get a lot of articles, but then they're not all not research articles. If you have to have research articles, you will have to go to specific websites like, say, PubMed or Google Scholar or something like that. You go type in diabetes, you'll have lakhs of like thousands and thousands of papers. But then if you type diabetes and a specific plant extract, then probably it'll narrow down to just 20, or say sometimes say if you type diabetes and turmeric, of course there'll be like thousands of publications, but then it will be less, like say 2000 or something like that. And then if you say diabetes and one of the component in turmeric, then of course you'll further narrow down. So that's how you do a review of literature. You do the literature search, and then you narrow down to that area. And you can also take the help of databases. Say, for example, you have genomic databases. You have databases for many different things, for social causes and all that. So you can just make use of the data that is already there in the databases, which is not published. Like if you today you have discovered a new gene, you don't know the function of it, you cannot publish a paper on it. What you can do is that you can submit to the databases. So that is also a finding. You submit it to the databases. And whenever you're going to use that piece of research done by somebody, you're going to refer. Hello? Yeah, you're going to give a reference or a citation. Then, okay, now after the review of literature is done, you come up with a hypothesis. As I told you, you basically come up with a null hypothesis saying that this won't work because the magnitude over here is 0, right? So if the drug works for diabetes, then you say that we reject the null hypothesis, which means to say that the drug works, right? Then you design your research, whether it is observational, whether it is experimental, whether you do it in a laboratory. Like, how do you do it? How do you conduct the research? And then how do you collect the data? So recording the data, basically I was talking about data collection tools, right? Whether it is just noting down or pictures or images, audiovisual, something like that. And of course, sampling plays a critical role in data collection. As I have mentioned before, sampling is very important. And sampling, there are different types of sampling. One is called as random sampling, something is called as cluster sampling and all that. So let's not go too much into details into the sampling thing. Once you've collected the data that you've collected should be analyzed, and it should be in a presentable form, in the sense that you have big numbers. Like say, for example, you have some like 10,000 numbers, and then you take average or mean or mode, or then you do some statistical methods to crunch down those numbers to something that you can actually interpret. Because if you have a sheet of paper with 10,000 numbers, you cannot conclude anything. You have to bring it, you have to analyze it, bring it to smaller numbers, so that those things you can compare, right? And if you have image or something, image you compare with the control group, in the sense that you have taken a mouse and then you have injured it. Now you have given some plant extract. You're seeing whether it has healed or not. You compare with the control with to which you have not given any plant extract. Now the experimental one where you have given the plant extract, and see what's the difference. And the data that you get after the analysis should be represented so that it can be easily interpreted. Now that can be in the form of tables, that can be in the form of graphs. You might have seen a lot of histograms and all that. And it can be in the form of pie charts. It can be in the form of Venn diagrams, right? And once you have the analyzed data with you, now what you do is that you draw conclusions out of it. Okay, so this drug has impact on diabetes to a certain extent. It is going to bring down the glucose levels to a certain extent. So now you go back, now from here you go back to your hypothesis. And if it works, the medicine works, you say that we reject this hypothesis, and we say that the medicine works for diabetic people. So that's how you draw conclusions. And you, later on, after your study is over, how do you tell it to people? Because you have data with you, you have done an experiment. How will other people know that somebody has done it? So that is very essential. So that is done by something called as report making. So when you make report, it can be for your master's dissertation thesis, bachelor dissertation, or it can be your PhD thesis, or it can be paper presentation, or you can publish in a research journal, like research articles, or it can be a patent. Say, for example, you have formulated a new thing that is not known before, and if you want to actually market the product, then you basically do make a patent. It's called as intellectual property right. Okay, so now talking about research articles, there are some peer-reviewed journals, which means that the quality of the research that takes place over published in those journals is very high. So they'll check each and every parameter. Only then they will accept your work. So you have peer-reviewed journal. The same thing can be called as index journals and something like that. Nowadays, if you do not have enough time to prove something, and then the competition is very severe. Say, for example, COVID. Because of COVID, so many labs at the same time they're working on so many different things. So the possibility of two different groups coming up with similar result is very, very high. So before you come up with a proper conclusion, or before you do a second or third set of experiments, what you do is you publish in something called as a preprint server, in the sense that this is not peer reviewed, but it's like you're saving your data, saying that we have done it first. And then after you put it in the preprint server, you can again publish it into a journal. Okay, so each journal that you publish in, like depending upon the significance of your work, it will be going to either higher impact factor journals or lower impact factor journals. So higher impact factor journals are something like Nature, or something like that, where the impact on the society or humans or anything would be very high. So only such kind of work will be published in higher impact factor journals. So that is a numerical value that people give for different journals. And citations is like you have done something today, and somebody wants to build up something based on what you have done. So they will cite your work in their paper, saying that, okay, so and so person has done something before, and then I am adding information to it now. Okay, so what should a report contain? So this is how the research process is, right? So I was talking about research, report making. So report making, whether it is thesis, whether it is a publication, or usually even if it is a patent, you basically have a title, you have abstract, you have literature review, you have materials and methods, how you have done it, you have the results part, you have discussion part, you have references part, references or citations that people have previously done, and then you have built up some concept based on it. And if you're talking about a patent, then you have something called as claims. Like, what do you claim that your product or your process can do newly, that's than something which is not there earlier. Then something that you need to keep in mind when you do research is the safety, like laboratory safety. You have to wear goggles, you have to wear a lab coat, there should be a fume hood, there should be an exhaust thing in your lab if you're working with chemicals and all that. Animal safety is like animals. If you're testing, say for example, some kind of tuberculosis models or something like that, you have to maintain that kind of animal safety, all that. So laboratory safety or animal safety, we have something called as, in biology we have something called as biosafety levels. So we have biosafety level lab 1, 2, 3. The higher you go, the more safer it is. So corona work is now being done in biosafety level lab 3, like the one that we have in CCMB where I work. So then we have human subjects. So human subjects, like if you're going to a hospital and taking a survey or something, you're taking data from them, you should not be troubling them too much. So there should be some kind of first of all ethics, and of course the safety, in the sense that they should be in a safer environment. Say some person is taking some data from a psychologically ill patient or something, so there is a possibility that he might harm himself. So you have to make sure that they are safe in the when you're collecting the data. And ultimately, whether if you're doing a laboratory work, or you're doing some work with animals, or it's a clinical setup, you end up with a lot of waste, whether it is chemical waste or biological waste. You have to dispose that waste. Now that waste disposal, it's in itself is very important, because otherwise you'll be spreading the disease, or causing ecological or environmental disasters and problems, and something like that. Now that's about safety. The ethics part is that we have like ethics for animals. We have some committees for animal called animal ethical committees, which will review the proposal, which will say, okay, if you are going to make a cancer tumor in a mouse, how big it can get before you can sacrifice it. Sacrificing it in a sense, killing it in a very peaceful way, so that it won't feel the pain. Say, so but the limitation on tumor, on the limitation of the injury that you can inflict upon animal, or how many animals you can use, will be decided by animal ethical committees. Similar way, if you're doing clinical research where humans are the subjects, like you're taking a drug, now you might be knowing about the vaccine trials that are going on. So what are the ethics? So ethics are like, you have to first take the permission, you have to take the consent of the patient, and they should be ready to come. It should be a voluntary participation. They should not be harmed in the study. And whatever data that you collect from them, the personal data, their age or whatever it is, which they do not probably want to be disclosed to any other third party, so that is something that you have to keep confidential, their health risks or something like that. And ethics, of course, when you have an intellectual property right. So for example, you have found out a new method to do something, so that the product will be formed at a very good quality product is being produced now, or the quantity of product is now increased a lot. So if someone is trying to steal your idea, that is wrong. So that is, you cannot do that. Research ethics. So even if it is for a research purpose, you should not be doing it, right? Before, of course, you can take permission and then do it. Then publishing ethics. So there are certain people, scientists or students or someone, they just manipulate some data, because they just have to come up with some kind of theory or numbers to just fit in their hypothesis. They do it because if they some things might not work or something, which is definitely not acceptable. If something doesn't work, it doesn't work. Research is like that, science is like that. If something works, it works. Or in spite of being you repeating so many times, that means that there is some variable that you are not looking at. So the reproducibility is not there. So there are a lot of people who there are a few people, sorry, there are a few people who do this data manipulation, which is a very wrong thing. So, and once they publish the articles, they can also be removed from the journal after it is called as a paper retraction. Okay, so you should be very ethical when you publish the data. Okay, now what can be the future? Like we talked about research methodology, we talked about research safety, ethics, and everything. But what can be the future? The future, of course, lies in artificial intelligence and machine learning, because with this you can process a lot of data. Like you can process the data that probably cannot be processed by like 100 people working together like for 10 days or something, which you can probably do it in 1 hour or something like that. Computing is definitely there, but then artificial intelligence is something ahead of it, right? So it is there's something called as artificial neural networks. It's like the program thinks like a human brain. So that's about the future. So thank you for your patience. Yeah, if there are any queries, please you can ask me. Hello.
Yes, sir. Hello. Good evening, sir.
Hello.
Hello, sir. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Yeah.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening.
Sir, at the beginning, sir, you mentioned
Mm-hmm.
evaluating data in research comprises, sir.
Mm-hmm.
So, can you, sir, let me know, sir, some briefs, sir, evaluating data, sir?
Evaluating data in the sense data interpretation. Say, for example, if you have uh, like, just take some example. Say you're talking about the nutrition versus the height. Okay. And then you have, say, 10, you've collected data from 1 lakh people, and that 1 lakh people you have, that is your data, that is your raw data. Now that raw data is very difficult to interpret. Like, how can you make sense of so many numbers? So basically what you do, you take average or mean, or you plot the error bar, and then you see, okay, majority of people lie from, say, 160 centimeters to 170 centimeters, something like that. So that is what I mean to say by data. What that is what I meant by data interpretation, data analysis and interpretation.
Okay,
Was
sir.
that your question or something else?
Okay, thank you, sir. And
Yeah.
sir, second question, sir.
Yeah.
Sir, about the sir review of literature and sir
Okay.
literature search, sir. Sir, both are same, sir, or sir
Both
different,
are
sir?
same. Both are same. I mean, there are just two different terminologies, but then essentially they're same. You review the literature. That's it. That's it. Or you read the literature. Both are same. Yeah.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir.
Yeah. Hello. Yeah, students, you can shoot any question to me. I'll be available for some more time, like whatever time Dr. Megha would allot me.
Yeah. Any more questions, students?
Hello, sir. I am Swapnil from Maharashtra, sir.
Okay.
Sir, what is the basic difference between thesis and research paper?
Okay.
Ba-
So thesis will be, yeah. Is that a question, or do you have to add something to it more?
no, sir. This is question.
Okay. So thesis is something that you conduct something, some kind of experiment, and then you write a report. Thesis is something that you have to submit to an authority to get a degree. Say, for example, you write master's thesis to complete your master's uh, what do you call, degree, or you submit a PhD thesis to get the PhD awarded to you, right? So that's what we call as research thesis. But publication is something that you communicate with the world. Thesis is something as a requirement, but research is research. The ethics, the safety, whatever you have to follow should be followed in both things. But then thesis can include different stories and almost all of the data that can make sense. But research articles should be completely based. It should be strictly based on like a certain fact that now you have done something, and then you are telling or proving to the world that you have done something and you found something. In thesis, you might be incorporating something that may not be that much valuable as much. But then in research articles, you have to be very precise. You have to be very correct because you're telling it to the world, right? Swapnil, did you get the answer, or do you want?
Yes, sir. I get it. Sir, one thing I want to ask,
Sure.
sir. Like it is regarding patents, sir. What is the difference between Indian patents and international patents? Because some ideas about Indian patents and they capture it for international patents.
Yeah. So, well, actually, I'm not an expert in patents and IPRs, but I can tell you that every country will have different laws. Say, for example, just forget about patents for some time. Let's say there are some employee benefits. Like if you have a private company and you have some employees, there are some rules and regulations that you need to follow for the benefit of the employees. So that depends from country to country. Similarly, patents as well, every country will have certain things, certain rules and regulations according to which you take patent. So if you take an Indian patent, nobody in you basically have a patent, and then nobody in India can infringe that patent. And you take patent from US, and US patent is more strong. That's what many people say because of the regulations that they have and then the impact that they have all over the world. So it's, that is run by US Patent Office. So every country would have an organization, something more like related to legal terms than research, I would say. Yeah, hope that answers, Swapnil.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you so
Yeah,
much.
yeah. Yeah, any more questions?
Sir?
Yeah,
Yes, sir.
yeah.
Okay. Sir, what is the case study method of research, sir?
What is the?
Case study method of research.
Okay, yeah. Actually, I did not bring those topics up, but then I'll tell you what is a case study. Well, actually, I think everybody should pay attention to it. Case study report is something like, say, some person has walked into the emergency room in a hospital with a fracture or something like that. Okay, now that kind of fracture, maybe they may not have seen. Nobody might have seen that kind of fracture, or that's the first time that they're seeing that kind of injury. Okay, so now that is a single case report. So that case report, because it is very unique and very rare, and people have not observed it before, you basically write a paper, research paper, and publish it in a journal, right? So that is called as a case study. But then imagine similar things are being reported at in different places. You compile all those things; they are called as case series. Yeah. Hello.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Is it answered or like you still need
Yes, sir.
clarity?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Hello, sir.
Yeah. Hello.
So you mentioned in your slide that references are important in case of research, So is there any difference between citation and reference? If there are, then can you please tell me what are the
No, no.
differences?
Yeah. The references and citations actually mean the same. Okay. But citation is referred is used especially if you're writing a research paper and then you say that you have cited in the sense that, oh, you're officially writing it down. Say for example, study X had found something, right? So then you cite the paper in the sense that at the end of the paper you have those things written. So you can call them as references and you can call them as citation, but references you call when you make the document. Citations you call it when it is publicly you announce it, like if it's published. See, till you write publication, you call it as a reference, or you can also call it as a citation. But then once it goes out, you basically call it citation, but both are actually one and the same. There's not much difference.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Yeah. Hello? Hello? Yeah, I want to add one more thing to it. Uh, Citation also means like there is something called a citation number. Say if your study is very relevant and many people are basing your study and then they are trying to design their experiments, then your citation number would increase a lot. Okay, that time we don't call it as reference. So we call it as citation number or citation index, right? Hello?
Yes, sir. It's
Yeah.
clear now.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, is there anyone with any questions? Any more questions?
Yes, sir. One more question, sir.
Swapnil, yeah.
No, sir, Devraj.
No, they were, yeah.
Okay, sir. Sir, in the library research, sir, so also research journal is the example of library research.
Can you repeat the question?
A research journal is
Okay.
the also example of library research in the type of research.
See, that's what, if say, for example, if you're going to make an experiment, if you're going to plan an experimental thing in a laboratory, okay, for which you want to study something that has been previously done, okay, then that part of work, it can be called as laboratory research. But then there are some studies where you don't do any experiments. You just read old papers, okay, and say, for example, people have published on concept A and concept B and concept D, and concept C is missing. And recently somebody has published that concept C as well. Now the research gap is filled. Now what you do is you add up all these A, B, C, D and make a story and write your interpretation, right? So even that is a type of research. Something that is not there, you make up a hypothesis with a missing piece that is recently known. So that is also there is something called as there are something called as review articles. There's something called as review articles. So review articles is like summarizing the already existing research articles which were published before into one article. That is called as a research article or sorry, review article, right? So yeah, they can also be published. So your question, either standalone, they can just do paper research, or that can be used as a background to build up, to design an experiment or design a hypothesis, then carry out experiments in the lab or field. Right?
Okay, sir. Yes, sir. And sir, anyone, sir, example in the mixed research, sir? Can sir, one second, sir. Again, sir.
Yeah, I was talking about the mixed research. I think I gave an example, right? So say, for example, you're talking about fossils. Okay.
Sorry, sir. Sorry.
Fossils, like say dinosaur skeletons and all that. Say you're working on dinosaurs. Okay. So dinosaurs, of course, are not existent now. They were existing long before. So what evidence you have about the dinosaur is the fossils that you get, the skeletal remains that you get, right?
Yes, sir.
Hello. So
Yes.
now what you do first thing is that you go to a library, you see what kind of dinosaurs existed. Okay. And is there any now people talk about the research gap is between like how birds have evolved from dinosaurs or something like that. So I think you might have read something called as Archaeopteryx in your +2 or something like that. So there is a connecting link between these two different things, dinosaurs and birds. So that was a dinosaur having feathers. So let's say you already hypothesized saying that, yeah, there could be something in between these two. Okay. Now you go and search in the literature. You probably might get something related to it. So that is say library research. Then what you do is that you go to a specific location and you start digging up to find the remains of something. Okay, you discover something, and then that is the field research. You go somewhere and then you collect the data, and you get those fossils to the lab, and then you do carbon dating to match the age. Like they were like 65 million years ago,
Yes, sir. Okay.
something like that. So like that, you can mix all these things and form mixed research, and then there is no restriction as to you have to only just do paper library research or this research or that research. Okay. Research is to just find out a solution to a problem. You can use anything you want. You don't even have to mention what you have done because people would anyway know it. Right?
Yes, sir. Yeah, thank you, sir.
You're welcome. Hello?
Any more questions, students?
Yeah, I would have actually made the presentation more interesting by incorporating a lot of graphs and colors and all that. I couldn't get any time, but then that's, I think if people would have understood, that's actually good. So
Yeah.
then but
No problem. That was very less time. We have short. You have accepted in very short time, so that's great. Yeah, Dr. Shaila is there.
okay, nice.
Shaila.
Hi Shaila, how are you?
I'm fine. A very informative session.
Oh,
Students definitely they have learned something very important from you today.
Okay.
So thank you for this. And yes, it is because you accepted in a very short time. So thank you. We should thank you for this. Isn't it?
Yeah, that's my pleasure.
Okay.
So if there are no questions, can we end the session?